Tariffs dominated Trump's presidency, shaped trade wars, and polarized opinions. Economists call them inflationary and harmful. Trump calls them necessary and patriotic. Trump said this in a Bloomberg interview recently.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff. And it's my favorite word.
Trump's love for tariffs wasn't just a campaign bluster, it was an essential part of his economic strategy. Yet many experts argue that tariffs increase costs, spark trade wars, and hit the average American's wallet. But why would Trump push so hard for something so many economists claim is bad for the economy? It's worth asking, are we missing something? Could tariffs play a bigger role in making America great again, or will they be as devastating as many critics have stated? Not just the economy, but also housing and housing affordability. Housing has been a central concern for most of us for quite a while now. This sector of the economy is very important to me as a full-time realtor for the last 20 years. The impact that tariffs will have on housing here in the U.S. has my attention. So what exactly are tariffs? Why does Trump champion them? And what are the benefits and drawbacks? And how will tariffs affect housing and affordability under a second Trump presidency? A tariff is a tax, except it's not on you directly, but on goods imported from other countries. Tariff makes foreign products more expensive, encouraging people to buy domestic goods instead. There are pros and cons to tariffs. These are all over the headlines right now. Advocates for tariffs believe they protect domestic industries. By making imports pricier, they encourage consumers to buy American-made products by making foreign goods less competitive. This demand can protect and create domestic jobs and industry, even lead to higher wages in some sectors of the U.S. And then there's national security. A recent and obvious example of this was during the pandemic when we saw a real-life events on how America was dependent on foreign products, including life-saving medical supplies. During the early stages of the COVID-19, China reportedly engaged in actions to secure large quantities of medical supplies, including protective masks, face shields, ventilators, test kits, pharmaceutical ingredients, as well as other crucial life-impacting necessities needed during that time, and intentionally cut down on exports to various countries, including the United States. This behavior has been described as hoarding by some sources. Washington U.S. officials believe China covered up the extent of its coronavirus outbreak, stockpiling crucial medical supplies, slashing exports of surgical face masks and other items needed to respond to the pandemic, according to the U.S. intelligence document obtained by NBC News. Leaders, including Trump, see tariffs as a way to secure critical industries and reduce the reliance on potentially adversarial nations. It's not just Trump. Biden also maintained most of these tariffs imposed by Trump's first presidency and also added to them. In May of 2024, Biden administration publishes required statutory review, the Section 301 tariffs, deciding to retain them and impose higher rates of $18 billion worth of goods. The new tariff rates range from 25 to 100% on semiconductors, steel, aluminum products, electric vehicles, batteries, battery parts, natural graphite, and other critical materials, medical goods, magnets, cranes, and solar cells. Some of the tariff increases go in effect immediately, while others are scheduled for 2025 or 2026. Based on 2023 import values, the increase will add $3.6 billion in new taxes. Section 301 tariffs on China currently account for $77 billion of the $79 billion in tariffs based on initial import values. China has responded to United States Section 301 tariffs on more than $106 billion worth of U.S. goods for an estimated tax of nearly $11.6 billion. Tariffs generate billions of dollars annually, which could be reinvested into the U.S. In fiscal year 2023, tariff revenues amounted to approximately $80 billion. The revenue generated from tariffs is still only a fraction of the total revenue U.S. receives from other sources, especially taxes generated from hard work coming out of the paychecks of our own citizens. Tariffs aren't all stars and stripes. According to many critics, they drive up consumer prices. Everything from cars, groceries, and housing can get more expensive when tariffs are applied to energy, steel, lumber, agricultural goods, and other imports. Critics also believe there's a risk of retaliation when the U.S. imposes tariffs. Other countries often respond in kind, hurting American exporters. Here's a clip from CNN showing that President of Mexico's response recently after announcement by Trump threatening a tariff on Mexico, Canada, and China.
Ready to respond in kind. Let me read to you a portion of that letter that she sent to President-elect Donald Trump. She said, quote, President Trump, neither threats nor tariffs will solve the issue of migration or drug consumption in the United States. Cooperation and shared understandings are required to face these important challenges. Imposing one tariff would mean another comes in response, continuing like this until we put shared companies at risk.
This back and forth can escalate into full-blown trade wars, harming industries and global relationships. Something all of us know too well is inflation, as it has impacted all of us pretty significantly over the last several years. Critics suggest higher costs ripple through the economy, adding pressure to families struggling with rising expenses. So if they are correct, why does Trump love tariffs so much? Is there something he knows we don't? It's all about the long game for Trump. He believes tariffs are tools to achieve broader goals, renegotiating trade deals, stimulating innovation, and creating more jobs. His message has been consistent for decades, way before a presidential run was even a consideration.
Well, it was very easy. I was tired, and I think a lot of people are tired of watching other countries ripping off the United States. This is a great country. They laugh at us. Behind our backs, they laugh at us because of our own stupidity and the leaders. I mean, what we have a Persian Gulf situation.
Since the 1980s, Trump had advocated tariffs to eliminate U.S. trade deficit and promote domestic manufacturing. Saying the country was being ripped off by its trading partners, imposing tariffs became a major plank for his presidential campaign. For Trump, tariffs are more than taxes. They're bargaining chips. This strategy is used to pressure countries like China, Mexico, and Canada to renegotiate trade agreements, as he has demonstrated in his first 4 years as president with NAFTA. More recently, he has threatened to increase tariffs on Mexico, Canada, and China to put pressure on these countries to prevent illegal immigration and drug trafficking while improving border security. So in this case, it's not just about economics, at least not exclusively. He stated that tariffs would remain in effect until drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. He's also floated ideas like using a tariff revenue to fund childcare solutions and boost economic growth. He has even hinted at possibly replacing the federal income tax with tariffs. It seems like a reach. It's been quite a while since the American people did not have to pay taxes. Safe to say things have changed in our country since 1913, making the idea of no income taxes seem like fantasy in the world that we live in now, at least. On that point, tariffs just 150 years ago accounted for 100% of our government revenue. Tariffs right now account for less than 2% of the revenue generated total, while income taxes and payroll taxes from Americans' own citizens are over 80% of the revenue. It seems a bit unbalanced to me. Maybe we can do better. Tariffs, in Trump's view, reduce Americans' dependency on foreign materials, ensuring critical industries are not held hostage by foreign countries' unnecessary resources. Post-World War II, the U.S. was a dominant economic power. We were responsible for manufacturing more than half of the world's produce goods and 1/3 of the world's global exports. At that time, we had a significant trade surplus, but since the 1970s, the U.S. has had an increasingly growing trade deficit. We're more reliant on imports, which makes the U.S. more vulnerable, which Trump has pointed to in many speaking appearances. China's trade surplus as a percentage of GDP nearly doubled from below 2.7% in 2018 to 5% in 2022. They are moving at an accelerated rate in sectors of the economy where the U.S. is falling behind. There is historical evidence to recognize vulnerabilities we have as a country, and it seems reasonable we would want to promote efforts to seek ways to strengthen those weaknesses, which is one of Trump's core strategies. But will it work? Now, here's where it hits home, literally your home. Tariffs do have an impact on housing, especially when they target materials like energy, lumber, steel, and everyday household items. According to the National Association of Home Builders, this report finds that roughly $10 billion of goods used in residential construction would be subject to a tariff each year. At the proposed 25% rate, this would equate to $2.5 billion industry-wide cost increase over 12 months following the imposition of tariffs. What does this mean for you? According to the critics of tariffs, higher income prices constrain supply of homes, more expensive renovations, and fewer affordable options. Critics also point to labor shortages, driven partly by immigration policies, which slow construction and increase labor costs, which of course are estimated by many economists who seem to be against the idea of tariffs. Here's the bigger picture. Tariffs aren't a standalone policy. They're part of Trump's broader economic strategy. This includes corporate tax cuts to incentivize domestic manufacturing, deregulation in industries like energy and manufacturing, and efforts to reduce illegal immigration. Counter to his critics, Trump believes that increased level of immigration is partially to blame for driving up demand. He believes the influx of immigrants is putting a burden on housing supply, causing higher prices in certain parts of the country. Trump campaigned for unique tax rates, such as no tax on tips for service workers, extending his initial Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2018, and additionally other credits specifically for housing, opening up federal land for building, offering benefits to family for caregivers, along with other plans to put more money in the pockets of the American worker. Here's a comment by Vivek Ramaswamy explaining this idea more clearly.
So that's a good question. Well, first thing is, let's talk about it on the level of the country. These are two different situations where one is you just say, hey, I want to protect American manufacturers, so I'm just going to slap a tariff on your company's products coming into ours, versus saying that your country is already applying a higher tariff to our companies than we are to yours, and we're going to play on an even playing field. Those are two different objectives. So on the first, where we're just willy-nilly just saying, yeah, I want to protect American manufacturers and they shouldn't have to compete, I'm just going to slap a tariff. That doesn't work because the other country is just going to raise the tariff to the same place. But, and I think this is where you got to listen to Donald Trump very carefully, what he's saying is we got to play on an even playing field, which I agree with, which is to say if another country is already applying those tariffs at a higher rate to us, directly or indirectly, right? There's many ways to apply a tariff. The regulation or otherwise. Those are forms of tariffs too. If you apply regulations selectively to foreign companies, that's effectively a tariff. So if you have other countries that are already treating us unevenly, then say, no, we got to compete on a level playing field. That to me is fair game.
One criticism specifically about housing affordability is that tariffs will drive up prices because it is less expensive to manufacture building materials in other countries, and it would be silly to expect the U.S. to compete. Here's another comment by Vivek Ramaswamy, who gives a great explanation of this.
Why is it more expensive to actually produce here in the United States? We don't often enough ask that question. Here's a big part of the reason why. The regulatory state in the United States is far more cumbersome for American companies than it is in other countries where those companies are then choosing to set up instead. Climate change, emissions caps. Now, interestingly, they don't apply those in China. Well, that's why a lot of U.S. businesses have gone to places like China to say they don't have to track their emissions there or limit them in the way that they do here in the United States. So that brings me back to the solution. The right answer for American manufacturers and American workers is to dismantle that excess regulatory state. But
this is part of Trump's overall strategy to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. Add that to tapping into energy cost reductions, increased employment, wage increases, tax cuts, cutting regulations, and efforts to cut down on wasteful government spending. Perhaps this is a system that can work as a whole, assuming he could pull it all off. Look at Japan and South Korea. The U.S. has nearly 80,000 troops overseas serving to protect them. And these countries have a significant trade surplus with the U.S. Trump has made points on how countries like these two that receive U.S. military support should pay in some form, which he has linked to tariffs. Here is Trump in a recent interview with NBC News talking about how we need to be on an even playing field.
I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich. We're subsidizing Canada to the tune of over $100 billion a year. We're subsidizing Mexico for almost $300 billion. We shouldn't be subsidizing. Why are we subsidizing these countries? If we're going to subsidize them, let them become a state. We're subsidizing Mexico, and we're subsidizing Canada, and we're subsidizing many countries all over the world. And all I want to do is I want to have a level, fast, but fair playing field.
I'm not saying this can or even will work, but focusing on tariffs as a singular strategy is too simplified for both critics and advocates when looking at all the ideas Trump is proposing. Sometimes you have to sacrifice the knight to take the queen. Is Trump playing chess while his critics are still trying to figure out how to win at checkers, or is that just giving him too much credit? Is it all negotiation strategy and posturing to get the players to the table to talk? And how far will he go with the threats? He has only 4 years as president, which both serves as an advantage and a disadvantage. This limits his time in office to complete some of what seems to be a very ambitious goal. On the other hand, re-election is not an option, so that can't be used as leverage to try to get him to back down from pursuing his policies, which seems to be very determined to do. It's hard not to be skeptical, mainly because his approach seems to be significantly different than anything we've seen before by a president at this level. So where does that leave us? Tariffs are complex. They're not inherently good or bad. They're tools with both benefits and drawbacks. Trump used them as a cornerstone for his vision for America, but their impact depends on how they're implemented and who's going to feel the effects. One last point about housing. I do feel like there is a path for it to have a positive impact, but it won't be immediate. Regardless of the direction these policies go, good, bad, or other, I believe we are looking at a slow grind. Whatever camp you are in, if you are betting on tariffs tanking the economy and housing, or if you are betting on it having an immediate positive outcome, neither will likely be a quick result. And both sides of the argument will likely be exaggerated. A crash is highly unlikely, based on signals rate. Prices will continue to increase, possibly with slower appreciation. This will vary based on different local markets. Long term, we have to be patient. Mortgage rates will drive things in the short term, while his policies won't have a direct impact right away. They could possibly indirectly change things depending on how it affects jobs, inflation, consumer confidence. One thing's clear, tariffs have the potential to reshape industries, housing, and the economy in ways that demand attention. I am truly interested in seeing how this all plays out. So what do you think? Are tariffs or any of Trump's policies going to move the needle on housing going forward, or even the economy in general? Let me know in the comments. Right now is a tricky time for real estate. It can be confusing to know what to do. So if you're looking for help to figure out if selling makes sense this year, or looking for a good realtor in your area, I work with many realtors across the country. In the description below, there's a link to reach out to me directly, and I can hook you up with someone that will take care of you. So if you like this video, you'll love the next one. See you next time.